Okay, this lesson is about adding and subtracting fractions, and just like in elementary school, you have to get a common denominator. If you're multiplying or dividing, you do not have to get a common denominator, but adding and subtracting, you do. So that's a big deal. You have to remember it. All right, let's look at problem 1. Our denominators are 3x cubed in both of them, so they already have a common denominator. When you add, that denominator stays the same. So that's not going to change. It's the same as it is over here. That's the purpose of getting a common denominator. And here, because there's a nice plus in the middle, I don't have to worry about distributing anything. I can just combine my like terms and put them together. So I have an x plus a 2x makes a 3x, and then a negative 2 plus a 4 makes a positive 2. And so I'm done with that problem. Then we move on to example 2, where we don't quite have a common denominator. So I need to decide what that's going to be. I'm going to go ahead and make some fractions to get ready. So just ignore the letters for just a second and think about the 2 and the 6. What would the common denominator between 2 and 6 be? Hopefully you said 6, because 2 will go into 6 and 6 obviously goes into 6. Then we look at your x's, and this is where it has to be representing both. And this denominator on the left has 2 x's, x squared, 2 of them, and the denominator on the right only has 1. So in order for them to both divide into it, you have to have the bigger amount. So I need x squared as my common denominator. And the same thing with the y's. I have 1 here and 2 here. I need them to both divide into something, so I need the bigger amount, which is the y squared. And so now, this is the way I teach it. I say, okay, go ahead and write down the top, whatever it used to be, and then put a multiply. You're going to multiply by whatever is new that you had to decide for the bottom. And so in this case, we went from 2 to 6, so we had to multiply by 3. X squared to x squared didn't change anything, but y to y squared, we had to multiply by y. So from this denominator to this denominator, we multiplied by 3y. I need to multiply the top by that same amount. Okay. Over here, with the fraction on the right, I'm going to write down my 7 and multiply. And then I'm going to decide what I got new on the bottom, what I had to multiply by. So 6 to 6 didn't change. X to x squared, I had to multiply by an x. Y squared to y squared didn't change. So in this one, I just had to multiply this top denominator by x to get the bottom denominator. So that's what I put with my top. Okay. Now we are ready to go ahead and combine. And just like the first example, once you have a common denominator, you just bring it over. You don't mess with it. You don't change it. But when I'm getting ready to work on the tops, I'm going to go ahead and multiply these things that I have written out. So I have 5 times 3y. I have 15y. And then I have a plus between them. And then 7 times x is 7x. Occasionally you can factor and cancel and simplify like we did in our previous lesson in this part, but we can't in this case. So I'm going to move on to example 3. Example 3, we have to do a little bit more work. As you notice, these look like the things that we factor, so you have to factor. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first. I'm going to change this to x plus 1, and I'm going to go ahead and put that in parentheses because that's going to help me out in a minute. And I'm going to factor a 2 out of the bottom as a GCF. So I have 2x minus 1. In my second fraction, nothing I can do to the top, but I can do a trinomial factor here where I have a negative 3 and a 2. So I need 3 and negative 1. So x plus 3 and x minus 1. So now I'm going to decide what my common denominator is and get set up for that. I'm going to go ahead and write those tops down since I keep those and they don't change. With the first one, I'm going to have to definitely have a 2. The second one doesn't have a 2, but I need it because both denominators need to divide into it. And I need an x minus 1. This x minus 1 that I just wrote down is going to take care of both of the x minus 1s here. And then I look over here, this has the x plus 3 we haven't covered yet. So there's my denominator. It represents everything on these between these two denominators. Okay. Now I'm ready to figure out what goes on top. So look at the bottom of the first one and the bottom of the one we changed it to. What is new? We have 2 to 2 is good. X minus 1 to x minus 1, nothing changed. But I have a new x plus 3. So since that's new, I also have to put it on top. In the fraction on the right, I kept my 2x as my old stuff. And then I look at the denominator. X plus 3 went to x plus 3, nothing changed. X minus 1 went to x minus 1, nothing changed. What did change is I now have a 2 in the denominator of the fraction on the right. So I'm going to multiply the top by 2. Okay, then I'm going to do some work to simplify this. I'm going to write my common denominator, so I'm equaling it like I did up here, and I don't change that denominator. And I have x plus 1, x plus 3 minus 2x times 2, which instead of that I need to write a 4. That would make better sense. Okay. Now, I just want to point out that you could FOIL double distribute on top and combine like terms, and then see if you had anything that would cancel out. But for right now and for on your test, I would really appreciate it if you would leave it like this, just so that I can see you've done your common denominators and combining correctly. If in the future we're using this in a problem, we might need to work it out. But for right now, I'm checking your process and your steps, and this is the best way for me to look at it for today. Okay, our last example, I have 3 fractions. And all of these fractions, except the first one, need a little bit of work. We need to factor. Okay, whenever we can, we want to factor. It just makes life easier. So I'm going to start by just rewriting that first one because I can't mess with it. The second one, I'm going to factor. This is a difference of perfect squares, so that's going to be x minus 2 and x plus 2. And then the third one, I'm going to take out a GCF, which is x. So x times x minus 2. Now I need to decide what my common denominator is. And be careful writing the signs. A lot of the problems we've done have had pluses. This now has a minus over here. And I need everything represented, so I definitely need an x. The second one says I need x minus 2 and x plus 2. When I come to the third one, I already have an x, so I don't need to write it again because I don't have x squared up here. And I already have an x minus 2, so again, I don't need to write it again. They'll both work off of what I have. I'm going to go ahead and write down my old stuff. 1, 4, and 2, that's what I had. And now I'm going to decide what's new. So when I look at the first fraction, I look at the bottom. The old stuff was an x, that didn't change. But I have this new stuff, an x minus 2 and an x plus 2. That's also going to go on top. In the second fraction, again, the bottom, the old stuff was x minus 2 and x plus 2, which I have right here. But I have a new x on the bottom, so that needs to go on top. And then my third fraction, I had an x before and an x minus 2. Those are right there. What's new is the x plus 2, so that needs to go on top. And then I'm ready to combine. And again, don't double distribute for today. I'm just going to say, okay, that's equal. Put my common denominator down one time. And I'm going to write down, since it's just 1, I'm not going to write that 1. We don't normally write that when it's 1. Okay, then plus my 4x and minus my 2x plus 2. And again, this probably, if you multiplied it out, could combine like terms and maybe do something, but I want to see your process, so leave it like this for today. That concludes this lesson.